Forget the comforting lie that this physical universe is a miraculous, perfect creation born of infinite love and divine will. That narrative is the single greatest spiritual deception ever programmed into the human psyche. The Gnostics, those who saw past the veil of fixed reality, revealed a profound and terrifying truth. The material cosmos, the entire three-dimensional world you see, touch, and experience, is not a creation. It is a flaw. It is a fundamental cosmic defect, a tragic mistake brought into being by a creator who was both blind and deeply ignorant. The entity commonly worshipped as the sole, omnipotent God is, in Gnostic cosmology, the Demiurge, an arrogant, chaotic, and finite being. His creation is not the pleroma, the fullness of light. It is the kenoma, the void, the empty space, filled with flawed, unstable, and ultimately dead matter. The ultimate question is not who controls the matrix, but what is the matrix made of? And the answer is the key to your freedom. It is made of defective substance. The Gnostic term for this defective physical substance is Hyle. Hyle is not the pure spiritual light of the monad. It is a dense, impure, chaotic residue, the solidified result of the Demiurge's own ignorance and fear. The universe you inhabit is therefore not merely controlled by the Archons, it is constituted by the Archons' flaw. This fundamental defect means that everything within the material world is inherently subjected to impermanence and decay. Since the matter itself is impure and separated from the true source, everything built from Hyle is doomed to break down, age, and die, suffering and pain, because the laws of the material world are built upon conflict and limitation, ensuring that the spiritual spark, pneumatikos, remains constantly distracted and in a state of turmoil. And spiritual blindness, because the density of Hyle acts as a profound filter, preventing the spiritual spark from clearly perceiving the transcendent pleroma, ensuring spiritual amnesia. The entire harvest cycle, the cycle of reincarnation, is necessary precisely because the material Hyle is flawed. The Archons must continuously recycle the imprisoned sparks of light, hoping to maintain a semblance of order and draw enough psychic energy from the suffering to sustain the Demiurge's faulty creation. The Demiurge, the architect of this flawed reality, is a tragic figure. He is not malevolent in the sense of absolute evil, but is disastrously malevolent through absolute ignorance. He genuinely believes that his flawed creation is perfect and that there is nothing beyond it. His boast, "I am God, and there is no other God besides me," is the ultimate proof of his spiritual blindness. The material world is the direct reflection of his limited mind. The laws of physics, the predictability of chemistry, the cycles of growth and decay, all are rigid, deterministic, and ultimately unconscious laws necessary to impose order upon the chaotic, defective Hyle he created. The Gnostic mission is not to fix the material world, which is impossible as the defect is inherent, but to escape it entirely. This path begins with the radical realization that the world's suffering and its apparent beauty are both aspects of the same fundamental cosmic flaw. The next steps will reveal the specific cosmic events that led to the creation of this Hyle, detailing precisely how the Demiurge, in his blindness, corrupted the very elements that structure our daily lives. The catastrophic birth of Hyle, the defective material substance of our cosmos, was the inevitable consequence of the Demiurge's spiritual blindness. This event was not a planned act of creation, but a spontaneous, violent emanation of pure ignorance that fundamentally contaminated the fabric of reality. The Gnostic narrative traces the origin of the Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, to the impulsive, solitary action of the Aeon Sophia, wisdom. In her desperate yearning to comprehend the monad, the true transcendent source, Sophia attempted to create without the necessary balance of her masculine counterpart, syzygy. This single act of passion and intellectual hubris resulted in an abortion of light, a creature born without true gnosis. This creature was Yaldabaoth, cast out into the Kenoma, the void. Yaldabaoth possessed immense power derived from his mother Sophia's fractured light, but lacked the essential wisdom to utilize it correctly. He was a blind artist with a powerful brush. His subsequent creation of the material world was not a conscious, divine act, but a chaotic, desperate attempt to establish order in the darkness that enveloped him. This attempt to imitate the true pleroma, utilizing only the limited, dark, psychic forces available to him, generated the impure substance of Hyle. The material world is, therefore, a direct reflection of the Demiurge's own psychic state. Where there should have been the pure, radiant essence of the monad, there was only the density of ignorance and the chaos of arrogance. The Apocryphon of John states that the Demiurge created his world from his own thoughts, which were stupidity, gloom, and sorrow, the very qualities that define the oppressive nature of the Matrix. Because Yaldabaoth was profoundly ignorant of the existence of the superior realms, the pleroma, he mistook his own limited, flawed cosmos for the entirety of existence. He genuinely believed that the material Hyle was the ultimate truth. This fatal delusion became the structural flaw of the universe. The cosmic belief system that ensures everything in the material world is subject to decay, conflict, and eventual entropy. This inherent defect is the primary reason why suffering is an immutable law of our reality. The Demiurge in his blindness then established a hierarchy of archangels and rulers, the Archons, to enforce his flawed law, the Hymarmene, over this new Hyle. These Archons were not created from pure light. They were generated from the chaotic passions of the Demiurge himself. Their nature is inherently tied to the defective material substance they govern, specializing in manipulating the densest energies: fear, desire, conflict, and biological compulsion. They are, in essence, the system administrators of Hyle. The final corruption of Hyle occurred with the creation of humanity. The Archons, driven by envy, attempted to create a human shell, but failed to provide it with life. It was only when Sophia secretly inserted her divine spark, the pneumatikos, into the shell that life began. However, this spark was immediately imprisoned within the dense, flawed Hyle of the physical body. This is the origin of the human condition, a soul of divine, perfect origin trapped within a vehicle of flawed, defective substance. The entire apparatus of the physical universe, the cycles of nature, the fixed laws of physics, the predictability of chemistry, is nothing more than a rigid defensive mechanism the Demiurge constructed to maintain a semblance of order over the underlying instability of Hyle. This order is a false order, a mere imitation of the true fluid perfection of the pleroma. The Gnostic mission requires the seeker to perceive this underlying instability, to see the cracks in the code of the material substance itself, before liberation can begin. The reality you trust is fundamentally broken. The structural defect of the material cosmos, the Hyle created by the ignorant Demiurge, is most clearly evidenced in the nature of the four elements that compose our world. The Gnostics asserted that earth, water, air, and fire are not pure foundational forces of creation. They are impurified, contaminated substances, the essential building blocks of the archonic prison. Because they were generated within the Kenoma, the void, by a being lacking gnosis, these elements carry the indelible imprint of the Demiurge's chaotic psychic state, his sorrow, his fear, and his density. Understanding the flawed nature of these elements is crucial, for it proves that the very fabric of our reality is inherently hostile to the spiritual spark. The element of earth represents the ultimate density and fixity of the matrix. It is the most stubborn, least yielding substance, and the Gnostics viewed it as the physical manifestation of the Demiurge's fear and ignorance. Earth is inherently limited, prone to decay, and bound by the law of gravity. This density reflects the depth of the Archon's spiritual blindness. and their determination to make the illusion of matter appear absolute and unchangeable. The earth provides the physical chains of the prison. The element of water is often linked to the profound sorrow and emotional residue of the cosmos, particularly the weeping of Sophia after her catastrophic error birthed the Demiurge. Water is characterized by its instability, depth, and potential for overwhelming chaos. It is the spiritual residue of the great cosmic mistake, manifesting as the internal turmoil and emotional cycles of the human experience. The Archons use uncontrolled emotions, grief, lust, attachment, to manipulate the soul, constantly dissolving the clarity of gnosis. The element of air represents the atmosphere and the psychic space immediately surrounding the earth. The domain most actively patrolled by the Archons. Air is characterized by its constant motion and lack of clarity. This reflects the confusion, delusion, and constant noise that the Demiurge generates to overwhelm the conscious mind. It is a turbulent, polluted medium that distorts perception. Air serves as the medium of psychic infection and misinformation, maintaining the illusion of division and external control. The element of fire is the most complex as it is the closest reflection of true divine energy, yet it is profoundly corrupted in the material realm. In Hyle, fire is characterized by its destructive, consuming nature, its inability to sustain life without consuming matter. It reflects the Demiurge's raw, uncontrolled power and his jealous, wrathful passion. The Archons use this energy to fuel rage, war, and the desire for material annihilation, ensuring that human spiritual energy is expended externally in destructive conflict. Furthermore, the light of our sun, a form of fire, is seen as the Demiurge's central mechanism for imposing the rigid deterministic law of time and fate, Hymarmen. The Gnostic understanding of these four elements mandates a spiritual practice of non-compliance. The seeker must realize that the materials of the matrix are inherently flawed and cannot be redeemed. They must be transcended. The goal is not to fix the earth, but to extract the imprisoned pneumaticos from its entanglement with Hyle. This requires turning inward, seeking the fifth element, the uncorrupted ether or quintessence of the pleroma, which lies beyond the reach of the Demiurge and his four flawed elements. This is the first radical step toward true spiritual autonomy. The Demiurge, having created the cosmos from the defective substance of Hyle, could not achieve true beauty or permanence, which are qualities exclusive to the pleroma. To ensnare the spiritual spark of humanity, the Demiurge employed his most subtle and devastating deception, the lie of beauty and the law of decay. This mechanism ensures that humanity becomes deeply attached to the very things that are programmed to betray them. The beauty perceived in the material world, the brilliance of a sunset, the symmetry of nature, the intensity of romantic love, is not a reflection of the monad's perfection. It is, according to Gnostic teaching, a crude, fleeting, and temporary imitation. A synthetic glamour crafted by the Archons using the remnants of Sophia's light that was expelled into the cosmos. This imitation serves as a bait. The Demiurge relies on the soul's innate memory of the pleroma's true transcendent beauty. By projecting a pale, mortal imitation, the Archons satisfy the soul's hunger just enough to keep it looking outward, at the material world, rather than inward, at the true gnosis. Every beautiful thing in the material world is inherently programmed for decay and death. The law of entropy is the Demiurge's immutable rule. The more intensely the soul attaches itself to the fleeting beauty, the perfect relationship, the beautiful object, the robust health, the more devastating the inevitable separation, loss, sickness, death becomes. This process generates massive amounts of pathos, grief, suffering, despair, the high-yield psychic energy required for the Archon's sustenance. The Archons actively promote the worship of this temporary beauty and material desire. Lust for possessions, wealth, fame. These desires anchor the soul to the flawed Hyle, convincing it that the true reward lies in the decorative aspects of the prison rather than in escape. The law of decay is the final proof of the material world's defect. If the cosmos were the product of a perfect, infinite creator, it would not be subject to aging, entropy, and eventual collapse. The Demiurge, due to his ignorance, created a system with a built-in expiration date. Time, within the matrix, is not a neutral river. It is a force of degradation. It constantly works to break down the integrity of the material body and the external world. This fear of time and decay is one of the most powerful psychological weapons used by the Archons to enforce compliance, as it compels humanity to frantically seek pleasure or meaning before it is too late. The Archons promote the idea of material sacrifice, giving up wealth, enduring physical pain, as a path to external salvation. The Gnostics saw this as a profound inversion. True sacrifice is the abandonment of attachment to the defective Hyle, not the worship of its limitations. The Demiurge demands external painful sacrifices because they reinforce the power of his material realm. The Demiurge also maintains the illusion by providing moments of apparent goodness, justice, and love. These are not true emanations from the pleroma, but limited programmed positive feedback loops within the matrix. These moments of happiness or peace are always conditional, fleeting, and contain the seeds of their own destruction. They are given just enough to prevent the soul from sinking into absolute despair, thus maintaining the overall energetic output required for the Archon's harvest. The Demiurge's morality is based on law and obedience, e.g., thou shalt not kill. While this maintains civil order in the prison, it is not true spiritual love, agape. It is a code designed to reinforce hierarchy and external judgment which the Archons administer. The Gnostic seeks love born of gnosis, internal awareness, which transcends all external legal codes. The ultimate tragedy is that humanity, mistaking this fleeting beauty and conditional love for the true divine experience, willingly dedicates its spiritual energy to the maintenance of the prison. The Gnostic seeker must develop the radical discernment to see the imperfect, temporal nature beneath every material manifestation, thereby breaking the spell of the Matrix's seductive glamour. The practical effect of living within the Demiurge's flawed creation, the Hyle, is that every human experience, from the physical body to the forces of nature, is fundamentally designed for entrapment and energetic harvest. This is the functional purpose of the Matrix, to ensure the continuous containment of the divine spark and its psychic energy. The Gnostics recognized the human body itself as the ultimate temporary prison, a structure built by the ignorant Archons. Since Hyle is inherently defective and mortal, the body is programmed for vulnerability, decay, and death. This programmed degradation serves the Archons in two critical ways. First, the inevitability of illness and decay creates universal fear of death, the ultimate psychological chain that prevents the soul from questioning the physical realm. Second, the physical limitations and the pain associated with biological processes, hunger, aging, disease, generate a constant stream of low-frequency psychic energy, pain, frustration, anxiety, which is the primary sustenance for the archonic hierarchy. This energetic drain ensures that the soul is perpetually preoccupied with the maintenance of its temporary cage, rather than the pursuit of transcendent gnosis. Beyond the biological constraints, the laws of the matrix function as tools of control. The rigid, predictable nature of physics and chemistry is not a source of comfort, it is a deterministic fence. The Archons utilize the illusion of scientific order to promote material determinism, convincing humanity that reality is fixed, unchangeable, and subject only to external impersonal forces. This belief negates the power of the mind, mentalism, and the sovereignty of the spirit, effectively conditioning the soul to feel helpless and dependent on the external world. This dependency prevents the seeker from realizing their power to mentally influence and transcend the physical laws. Furthermore, the Archons actively exploit the flaw in the element of air to conduct psychic manipulation on a massive collective scale. They populate the psychic atmosphere, the Kenoma, with narratives of conflict, perpetual crisis, and engineered division. The modern extensions of this, mass media cycles of fear, political polarization, and societal conflict, are all forms of psychic warfare designed to keep the collective consciousness in a state of perpetual emotional turmoil. The chaos generated by these engineered divisions ensures a continuous harvest of high-yield emotional energy, effectively clouding the soul's ability to achieve the inner stillness required for gnosis. The Gnostic understanding of the flawed material existence mandates a radical shift in perspective, non-identification. The seeker's survival depends on the conscious, continuous refusal to identify the divine self, pneumatikos, with the flawed material body, Hyle, or the illusory world. The goal is to recognize that one's true identity is eternal, whole, and separate from the physical decay and emotional chaos of the matrix. This detachment, cultivated through disciplined awareness, is the only way to cease feeding the archontic structure. The final step is to turn this knowledge into action, preparing the self for the ultimate ascent beyond the confines of the defective cosmos. The meticulous revelation of the Demiurge's flawed creation, the Hyle, is not meant to induce despair but to inspire radical spiritual autonomy. The Gnostic mandate is clear. The material world cannot be reformed, it must be transcended. The final act of liberation is the conscious reclamation of the divine seed, the pneumatikos, from its imprisonment within the defective material substance. The primary spiritual practice required for this reclamation is non-acceptance of the flaw. The seeker must consciously and continuously refuse to accept the limitations, decay, and suffering of the material world as immutable or divinely ordained. This is a rejection of the Demiurge's first lie. This refusal manifests in several ways. Refusal of the body's destiny, viewing the body not as self, but as a vehicle of Hyle, subject to programmed decay. This mitigates the fear of death and disease, thereby disarming the Archon's primary weapon. Refusal of emotional consumption, where the seeker masters the passions by recognizing them as low-frequency energy designed to feed the Archons. Emotional energy is consciously transmuted into apatheia, spiritual stillness, and gnosis, conscious insight. Refusal of material worship, where the seeker actively detaches from the pursuit of wealth and material beauty. Recognizing them as fleeting illusions, the decorative features of the prison designed to distract the soul. The Gnostic's ultimate goal is to move beyond the four flawed elements of Hyle and access the fifth element, the pure, uncorrupted Aether or Quintessence of the pleroma. This transition is achieved through conscious awareness and will. By unifying the fragmented psychic aspects of the self, the seeker generates a spiritual energy that resonates at a frequency higher than the Demiurge's entire realm. The physical prison simply ceases to have jurisdiction over a soul operating on the frequency of the true monad. The knowledge that the elements themselves are compromised is the final code. You must actively seek and cultivate the immaterial, truth, consciousness, sovereignty, as the only true, non-decaying wealth. The final act of liberation is the conscious reclamation of the divine seed, the pneumatikos, from its imprisonment within the defective material substance. The final triumph belongs to those who apply the knowledge, embrace the rigorous inner work of transmutation, achieve the powerful unity of the syzygy, and activate the full, unfettered power of your mind to rewrite the reality that was written for you. The ultimate command is not passive reflection but active transmutation. The Gnostic mandate is clear. The material world cannot be reformed, it must be transcended. The final act of liberation is the conscious reclamation of the divine seed, the pneumatikos, from its imprisonment within the defective material substance. The final victory belongs to those who apply the knowledge, embrace the rigorous inner work of transmutation, achieve the powerful unity of the syzygy, and activate the full, unfettered power of your mind to rewrite the reality that was written for you. The search for freedom is an internal rebellion. The laws of decay are now exposed as mere rules of a temporary prison. Your liberation awaits your command. Activate your freedom. Subscribe to the scrolls of Anubis. Join the community dedicated to reclaiming the spiritual sovereignty lost in the Matrix. Click the bell to receive the next essential truth. Reject the defect. If this knowledge has inspired you to reject the flawed material world, tap the like button. Your action is a declaration of non-compliance with the Demiurge's law. Choose the Aether. What aspect of the material world will you consciously choose to transcend today? Share your commitment to Gnosis in the comments below. Your declaration empowers the collective assent. The physical world is a flaw. Your consciousness is the correction. Choose Gnosis. Choose the Aether.